Welcome to our next episode of OK Copy Podcast. Today we are joined by renowned director Ray Smiling. Ray.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us today.
Of course.
Excited to have you on board.
Thank you.
Firstly, congratulations on all of your success. Being named Director to Watch 2023, being signed to Division 7. It's been amazing to watch your growth, very inspiring to watch your growth, and you do all of the things that you said you wanted to do when we met a while ago. And so for the audience, for the people that don't know you, would love to just for you to tell us about yourself, a little bit about your journey and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah. Well, right now I'm a director. Like you said, I'm signed to Division 7. I do a lot of sports and lifestyle sort of stuff. Before that, I was a creative director for 7-8 years, something like that. Did a lot of sports and lifestyle stuff there as well too, but did other things. I ran CoverGirl for Droga 5 for a year and a half, which was interesting considering you can't tell, but I don't wear makeup.
Skin is popping
just beautiful. It's just water. But so I've done a fair amount of stuff in the creative direction world before I jumped over to direction, and before that, I did a bunch of stuff from working in streetwear to video games. So I've had quite a long journey of making things and people giving me money for it. So
yeah. Did you go to school for advertising or anything like that? Okay.
I originally went to school for biotechnology because I saw the movie Jurassic Park and I was like, I want to make dinosaurs. And then I got to college and they were like, we absolutely do not do that. And actually the sort of message of Jurassic Park is that you shouldn't make dinosaurs. So we have some concerns about your reading and listening comprehension. I was in school. I was just sort of hanging out and taking classes and psychology and things like that. Okay. But, at the time I was just, I had a bootleg copy Photoshop and Premiere and stuff, and was just let me film my friend's band or let me make a poster or just figure out how things were done. And that sort of led me into the world of making things. Yeah.
Okay. So it was just kind of this journey of making, creating, and continuing to...
And figuring it out myself.
out.
I haven't really had much formal education, but personally, I think that has led me to... continually be learning and to have I think most people have a degree of imposter syndrome, but kind of using that in a good way where it's okay, well, I'm not going to walk into a room and someone's going to be well, we should use the Ludovico technique. And you're like, what the fuck are they talking about? So I'm let me try to get as much information in my head before I walk in that room so I don't embarrass myself and say, hold on, I have to go to the bathroom and Google what someone's talking about.
Yeah. So you try to stay informed and be prepared as much as possible. Yeah. What is it that keeps you inspired though? How do you continue to feed such innovative, invigorating, and I find a lot of your work very comedic and very relatable as a Black person, because I feel there's always this underlying tone there in all the work that you do, but how do you continue to inspire yourself and inspire thought?
I think I'm constantly watching and digesting all kinds of stuff from YouTube channels that are 2 16-year-old kids in the Bronx just uploading videos to YouTube and they have 47 views and I'm this is the funniest thing I've ever seen. I don't care if anyone else, to old classic, Russian movies and books, and really trying to pull in things from everywhere. Comic books, manga, all the things. But also kind of trying to keep a sort of approach that kind of feels very rap inspired.
Yes.
Of if you're the top rapper, you can't fall off. And if you're coming up, you're I got to take out Lil Baby. I got to take out Jay-Z. I got to, you kind of have your eye on people who are way ahead of you. And you're everything that I'm making, I'm trying, even if I am nowhere near them, I'm I got to put out this song and it's going to totally destroy Jay-Z's album or, whoever is at the top at the time. So kind of using that mentality where I see something I see Moonlight and I'm like, fuck Barry Jenkins. Not like in a, he seems like a lovely person, but I'm like, I got to make my next thing destroy Moonlight, you know, and which is kind of psychotic, but, you know, in another way, you know, it like forces you to keep pushing and trying to find the ways to make the things that I make as good as possible. Just it.
So is that where Creator Destroyer came from?
Yeah.
I always wondered.
Yeah. It came from actually I was weirdly, I've had that URL for years. It came from a quote from Robert Oppenheimer, who invented the atomic bomb. Where he has that famous, I become I'm the destroyer of worlds, I become death. And I researched where that came from, and it comes from a Hindu, I can never pronounce the name, the equivalent of the Bible for Hindu people. It's like the Baha, I can never pronounce it. But it comes from their mythology, and it was like Shiva is both the goddess of destruction and creation. And it was like the idea that making and destroying things is all a cycle. And for me, it was always the idea of like, you intake things, and to truly understand them, you have to rip them apart and really break it down. And this is why this works. This is why this works. And then you take all those disparate pieces and then you rebuild them into your thing. And so that's always just the process that I've sort of taken.
That sounds like production.
Yeah.
That sounds like that's my job. When you have an idea, I gotta rip it apart and break it down. Make sure it makes sense. And so I guess going from creative direction to director, being a director, and we talked about this earlier, what is it that appealed most to you about taking that route and, you know, being persistent on going in that direction?
I think I realized that like I am really interested in the execution of things. Like I love coming up with ideas, but I kind of like in terms of like if you see a commercial on TV, it's probably been cooking for at least 6 months, right? And so the director probably didn't come in until about a month before it. So I much rather jump in at the month before the thing is ready to go, and everyone's like, okay, we've got our ducks in a row, pretty much. Here's the general idea, and then you can come in and add your little sazon, you know, rather than the like 6-month journey of like iteration. I just find it occasionally it can be a little like, you watch your like babies die.
Yeah, it's familiar. A little bit of your creativity dies through that process. Yeah.
And like you can make really cool stuff. It like cuts all the edges off when you do the same thing over and over and over again to get to a great thing. But for me, I like to like come in, add the flavor, let's go shoot it, and then get out and go on to the next thing.
What is some of like your favorite pieces that you've done so far?
I did a short film last year that was called "Play This at My Funeral," and that was sort of like a visual mixtape. It was about when people, the moment like a song becomes your song, when it just isn't like a song that you've heard that everyone's heard, but like you attach a specific memory or experience to it. And so I made like these little vignettes that were about those moments for different people with different songs. That was, I'm very proud of that because it really, I think, captured a lot of things. Like it's very like New York based, covers a wide variety of music, and there's a bunch of like my own personal experiences put in there in varying degrees. Yeah. So I was really proud of that.
I love that. I loved also, there are two pieces, your throwback, the khaki piece, which I feel like was so far beyond its years at that time. Even was it before even OnlyFans was a?
I think OnlyFans had maybe been around.
Whispering.
Yeah, it was right around the same time.
Okay, and the Mad Matter. How did you get to Mad and Matter?
Mad and Matter.
And what was that experience like working with like puppetry as well?
Mad and Matter was a series of content commercials, sort of
digital strategy series. Everything's a blur at this point.
But that was for Nike for when LeBron broke the scoring title.
Right.
And it was with two puppets who had like an ESPN style talk show, but it was like in their basement. And one of the guys was just a hater of LeBron and kind of a kook.
Like Stephen A.
You said it. I didn't say it.
That's what it reminded me of.
Lay off the weed. My one of my old partners, Gerardo Ortiz, he's over at Uninterrupted.
I know Gerardo.
There you go.
We worked together.
Yeah.
Okay.
He and I, English, had worked together years ago.
Nice.
And he had called me up and he was like, hey, I got this thing. It's kind of weird and it's about sports. So I thought of you. And I'm like, fair. And so we cooked together on that. And it was great working with puppets. It's the second time that I've worked with puppets.
Okay.
And it's so weird because like it's a puppet. You with Matt and Matt, we sat through like the design of it and everything. And you see the people behind it and you're like, yeah, it's a piece of felt and whatever.
Right.
And the first 5 minutes you talk to the puppeteers and you're like, hey Dave, hey Nancy, can we do this, that, the other? 5 minutes in, you're just like, Matt, I need you to do this. And they'll respond to you in the puppets, the puppet will turn to you and be like, okay, cool. Yeah, I'll do that. And you're just like, you just totally lose yourself to the illusion.
Yeah.
And it's kind of awesome.
Pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Also amazing how quickly they get into character too.
Yes. Yeah.
That's dope.
It was really fun and I need to find something else to do with puppets because I really loved it.
Yeah, I loved it. We pitched something. We'll see if it comes alive. Maybe we'll call you to do it for puppets. So when I saw that, I sent it to the team, of course, for inspiration. So going back to just like your process, can you share a little bit about like your directorial process? Like what are important steps for you to take let's talk about when you are even building a treatment now that you're in this cycle of building treatments for jobs and taking the calls. Like what is your process and what are the steps or things that you do that are important for you that you would also recommend to aspiring directors?
I use the same process, honestly, when I putting together treatment to direct something as when I was creative directing something. And honestly, I probably would use it if tomorrow I decided to make a country album or whatever, whatever creative thing. And to me, it's like I always try to find the insight first or the like, what is the thing that is like true about whatever we're talking about in like a just like human level. Like forget if we're talking about sneakers or cars or whatever, just like nail in on something that feels like just true about human experience.
Right.
Once I get that, then I'm like, okay, cool. Like visually, what are the things that sort of signify this? So, I'm trying to think of an example. Like the short that I was just talking about, I was sort of thinking about the idea that like somewhere out there, someone hears Who Let the Dogs Out and they start crying, right? Like that has to, like for someone, that has to be a song that brings up an awful memory, right?
Or someone they love that was their favorite song.
And then they're like, grandma, she loved it, right? Cool, great. So that is true of like any piece of music that reaches a certain threshold of popularity. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like music, we attach our own emotions, our own stories to music. And then it doesn't belong to the musician anymore. This thing is ours now. Okay, cool. That is the insight. That's just like true for humanity. Then I'm like, okay, so how am I going to bring that truth to light? And for me, for that thing, I was like, I want to make a film that's like a mixtape. So where like, back in the day when you would make physical tape mixtapes and, you make a mixtape and you spend all this time being like, this song goes first and this second,
how's it going to blend?
How it's going to blend and this, that, the other. And what am I trying to say with this? But ultimately you could just like the person who received it, you could get to track 3 and be like, I don't like this song and just fast forward until you hit track 5 or whatever. And I was like, I want it to be that every song is a different story. Every vignette in it is a different song, a different story, has a totally different emotion. And then in between them, I do have it like fast forwarding and you come to little snippets of other stories that you only get like 5 seconds of, and then you come out of it and you go to a different story. So that is like, that was my visual interpretation of it. And then from there, then I just I think of and I find visual references for things like, if I'm like, this story is supposed to be sad. And I'm like, all the things in my head where I'm like, that scene in a movie was sad, or that painting is sad, or da. And I just started grabbing all those things and why does this work? And then, like I said, reform it into, okay, this thing we're going to do, that's how we're going to approach it to make it feel as sad as possible or as happy as possible or whatever.
Whatever emotion you're looking to bring forward. Where do you go to pull your references? Because sometimes I hear directors or creatives having a hard time finding sources or running out of sources.
Yeah, I think 2 or 3 things. One, I think as a creative person, it is your job to have a lot of mentally, like a lot of resources.
Can you say that to the camera one more time, please?
It's your job to like know your thing to the nth level.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean you have to like know every classical thing. Like if you're a rapper, it's not like you have to love every Jay-Z song and every Biggie song and every Tupac song. It's perfectly fine if you're like, Jay-Z is old, I don't give a fuck about that dude. Great. That's totally cool. But whatever you do care about,
you need to know it.
You need to know it, and you need to know all the different variations. Yep. And like, if you love Lil Baby, like the Lil Baby songs that make you cry, why do those make you cry? Right. And why is Sexy Red really good and Glorilla's really good, but some other woman who's a rapper right now isn't good, even though conceptually they might all be the same thing.
Right.
What
is the reason?
What are the differences about that? So I have years of just cataloging that stuff in my brain, but then also I'm constantly on YouTube or watching DVDs with director's commentaries or this, that, the other, so that I can figure out things that I don't notice. So if I'm like, oh, I think Sexy Red is better than Glorilla because of the way she flows, because she just is more fluid on a beat. Cool. But then I might watch something or read it. I might read a review in some music blog and they're like, oh, Sexy Red, her beats are like da-da-da-da-da. And that's why they feel more energetic. And I'm like, oh, I totally missed that. But I need to find other people's takes on it. So I'm the type of person where I go to watch a movie and I'm like, cool, this was great. I'll go see Barbie and I'll be like, cool, this was great, or I thought that sucked. Either way, I'm still gonna go home and read 15 different reviews of Barbie
to get different perspectives.
To get like, hey, I'm a woman who grew up playing with Barbie. Here's my take on it that me, a man who never played with Barbie, you're totally missing. I'm a blonde woman, white woman who looks like Barbie. This is what I took from it. I'm an Indian woman who looks nothing like Barbie. Here's why I did fuck with it or I didn't fuck with it. And I'm just like, give me all the opinions and all the things so that when I go to make something, I can try to like at least start keeping those
in consideration.
Yes.
Yeah. Especially people not being seen or not feeling hurt, which supposedly we'll see on Friday. Or I'm going on Saturday, but
it's supposed to be very inclusive.
Very inclusive. I saw the new collection. I heard that as well, but we'll see. What I will say is I would love to hear what is one time maybe you weren't prepared or there was just like an ultimate fuck up and it became a learning lesson for you, and what was that learning, and maybe how did you overcome it? Because I think it's important to unglamorize what we do and normalize making mistakes, because that's also a part of the growth. And so would love to hear any of those stories you can share.
Totally. I think first of all, especially film is being a thing that you can't just do by yourself. There are going to be there's always going to be fuck ups. And that doesn't mean you have like a bad crew or people weren't paying attention or you weren't prepared. Even if you're the most prepared and you have all the professionals in the world, someone will misunderstand something. Moving parts. The more moving parts, the more something is likely to fail. And so you will inevitably run across failures, and then you have to figure it out in the moment. I'm trying to think of something where the first time I filmed, the first time I made a short film by myself, my money, I'm calling all the shots. I had a scene planned where it was, my main character was a woman and she's in the subway. And a guy comes up to her and he starts trying to hit on her. And the dialogue was like pretty, I'm like, literally just try to hit on her and you are not interested. Cool. That's it. Easy enough. And I went and I shot it in the subway. What I didn't account for that seems like insanely obvious in retrospect is that, yeah, a train might come every 5 minutes on your side, but you have to also account for the train that's coming on the other side.
Yes.
And when you start doing that math, it's quiet for 30 seconds at a time. And so we really kept trying to like, okay, go. And he'd be like, okay, so, hey, how's it going? And you're like, oh, God. And so we did the best we could, got as much of the dialogue as I could. And then when I got to the edit, it was like, yeah, it's so cut up. It just doesn't work. And this is what happened. Like, these things happen in every single shoot that has ever existed in the history of life. And the more you read about people making things, the more you realize that there are a lot of things that are lucky accidents or you're covering up something later. And so one thing I did was in the edit, we played with just removing all the sound and just having it be audio. And I was like, that's cool. And then I tried a thing where I subtitled it, even though they were speaking English. And I was like, that works. That's interesting. Ultimately, I just left it with, I just increased the music and just had no natural audio.
Okay.
And I cut it so you just saw her reaction and you saw him like, this isn't working.
Silent movie.
Yeah, it just became a silent movie.
Yeah.
That section became a silent movie. And you got it. I was like, you really just need a couple of reactions and you get exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of filmmaking is, okay, this is what we ended up getting. Now let's figure out how to save it. Yeah.
Sound is always a thing, whether it's an airplane or a train going by. There's construction. There's so many times where I've had to reschedule or pay off construction workers to pause the shoot until they were done what they were, depending on how nice they were. Yeah, there's definitely a hiccup that I've seen. So with that, is there any advice that you would give to, I'm not only going to say aspiring directors, so I feel like I keep like honing in on that because you're a director, but in general, creatives, producers that are emerging or looking to break in?
I would say if you are, I'll speak to creatives in general. If you're an emerging creative, I think the first thing you have to realize is that it is very rare for people to let you do a thing that you haven't already done, which it sucks, and it sounds sort of defeatist, but I think if you go into it knowing that, even though in your head you're like, I know I could direct a music video for this artist who I love, if you approach them and you don't have videos to show that you've done, they're probably just going to politely be like, no, I'm good. So with that in mind, I really am a big proponent of like using the resources you have to get as close to making the thing that you want to make. Obviously, if you want to make a Batman movie, it's going to be hard because you don't have Batman movie money. But what can you do to get close to that? I'd say the second thing is sort of piggybacking off that is when you do make things, you have to realize you are still competing with Christopher Nolan's Batman or whatever, Moonlight, or all those things that do have money. So the way that you compete against those things that have more money and more resources than you is you have to figure out what do you have that they don't have or that they're not interested in speaking to. And so I think, like if you were like, I really want to make a Batman movie, that's like my thing. I love superheroes, this, that, the other. You don't have money for CGI. You don't have money for crazy costumes, this, that, the other. But let's say you lived near a cave system, naturally, and please,
drive upstate to one.
yes, safe, please don't murder yourself in a cave. But you could probably get a pretty good cosplay Batman costume for $500, let's say. And you have these caves that are right by your house or drivable, and you could film something in there that would look pretty good and pretty interesting. And that cave system is going to be unique to where you are. Okay, cool. Now you're taking what you have to make a thing that feels interesting. And you're only going to be able to show your guy in the cave, and maybe you have to limit him to shadows and just a peek of it. But like, as I'm riffing this, I'm like, what if I did a story where it's like some little kids have just stumbled across the Bat Cave. And like, they're just like in the woods hanging out, and then they're like, oh shit, this is where Batman lives. And so maybe you only partially ever see Batman, and maybe you only film him from, a certain angle, but really you're all about the kid's face the moment when they realize Batman is real and this is where he lives. Cool. You're not going to be able to do a stunt where you flip over a truck, but now you can make a story that is attainable for you and a different thing than what the other guys are making.
Exactly. And giving the decision makers something to create some belief in your creative ability. Even the fact, first off, also the fact that you just riffed that off and just gave that idea away. But yeah, showing that your mind is able to think creatively even with limited resources, I think is an important thing as well.
It's always a thing of like, you're not going to be able to battle the people who have more money than you one-to-one. You're not going to be able to go dollar for dollar.
Or that have just been in the industry
for so long.
Because I think that's always the hard part. Like, you came out swinging, but you also came with your creative direction portfolio, right?
Yeah.
So for some of the emerging directors, even I'll say a lot of them on our roster, they have maybe 3, 4, 5 pieces of work that is continuing to, get them in some doors. But a lot of times they're turned down because perhaps it's a beauty piece and they only have 2 beauty pieces and not 4, right? And that's our directors. Then there's the collective that we're trying to just build and support in LA, and they maybe have 1 piece, right, here or there. And so it's always a question of like, what can they do to play in the world? Yeah.
And I think it's ultimately, one, you figure out what you're trying to do. Are you trying to be a beauty director?
Right. Be clear on your genre.
Be clear on the genre that you want to operate in, the end goal that you want, and then again you figure out the way to get there with the resources that you have. And I think a lot of that is realizing the experiences that you have, the rooms that you've been in that most people have not been in, and taking advantage of that, because obviously you try to make everything look as great as you can, as professional as you can, get good sound. Sound is generally where everything falls apart.
Yes.
You get good sound, you get the best image you can, the best camera you can, all that stuff. But now what are we pointing it at? And if you are like, hey, I really want to do beauty, you don't have access to models with the prettiest, most perfect face or whatever. But again, like, who are you? What do you do? What do you have? Where do you hang out? What do you have access to? And if you're like, if you are like, hey, I live in New York, and there's a whole community of drag queens here and bars that do drag brunches and this, that, the other. Could you say, hey, this drag queen, I love what she does with her makeup. Hey, one night before you go on for your performance, can I come down and just film you?
Building your look.
Build the look, and from going from bare face to the whole production.
Right.
And that could end up being something where you're like, hey, I'm going to make this and I'm going to give this to you. This is a cool thing that you could put on your Instagram or your TikTok or whatever, whatever. Right. You have a piece of content for free. But I also now am able to get the thing that I want to get, which is, hey, I can shoot beauty and I can shoot, and you get as many lights as you can and you do all the things. And it won't be the same thing as, whoever the A-list model is being shot by Fenty or whatever, but it's going to be your thing.
Right.
And the more you do more your thing and figure out the thing that you have done that is interesting, I think, or captivating. If you live in the middle of nowhere, but like you really are, you've been to plenty of bull riding events. I don't know how many people have actually like seen bull ride, like for real,
or
like,
even understand the life of people that actually compete in bull riding.
Yes, because if you think about it, I'm like, okay, cool, I've seen the guy on the bull, you fall off.
Right.
I don't know, like, I assume those dudes get fucked up. What do they look like the day after?
Right.
You know what I mean? Or like, does bull riding pay a lot of money? I don't imagine so. So like, is that guy like driving an Uber on Tuesday with a broken arm because he was riding a bull on Sunday?
Right.
That's an interesting story.
Also, like, do they work out? Like, what?
I have no clue. But
what
these
are the health requirements?
This is all the things that like, if you're in the bull riding community, these are things that are interesting to other people because they haven't seen them. They haven't experienced it. So it's like trying to find out the things that you've done that are interesting, or the places that you go that are interesting that other people just don't necessarily know.
And would you say interesting to the broader like community, to like cross-cultural, cross-generational, try to create more broadly?
I think any art is a delicate balance between specificity and universality. And I feel like you got like two routes. You can take a very universal emotion and you can show it very specifically. So you could do a love story in the world of bull riding. I've never seen that.
No.
But I've been in love before. Most people have been in love. So we all understand love. But if you dress it up in bull riding, you've got a thing that is interesting.
Right.
Or you could take a very specific experience, a very specific emotion, and put it in a universal dressing. So if you're like, hey, I was, the number 2 bull riding guy in my state, and then I lost to the number 1 guy, and it broke my heart. I don't necessarily know all the intricacies of bull riding rankings and stuff. So maybe you might take that and make that a basketball story. I'm just saying.
Them competing and the lead up, the build up.
I'm the underdog, he's the top dog,
Yeah.
You got all the pieces there, but now you might want to put it in a different thing because your world might be so insular.
Right.
Sometimes you can just find a way to be like, hey, I'm just going to introduce you to this insular world. But most of the times that's on a very like basic story.
Yeah.
So we can understand the world. But
yeah, I like how you suggested taking the bull riding and kind of packaging it into a like kind of NBA basketball way of showing competition that is going to be more relatable to
more people.
More people, exactly. What are you reading right now or listening to?
What I've been listening to, I have been listening to Sexy Red a lot.
Okay.
I've been listening to another rapper named BLP Kosher. He's a Jewish trap rapper.
Okay, like Dave?
Not quite. I did watch the latest season of Dave and I enjoyed it quite a bit.
Yeah, I have 2 more episodes left, but
it's good.
Yeah.
What have I been reading? I've been reading a book called Chain Gang All Stars. I can't remember the guy's name who wrote it, but Chain Gang All Stars, and it's like about a future world where people who are in prison can get out of prison by competing in basically like gladiatorial events. And it's about like 2 black women who are the like Michael Jordan and LeBron of this gladiatorial combat world. And it's very sort of dystopic and, sort of satirizing the world that we live in now. But
reminds me of Hunger Games.
Yes, very Hunger Games, but from a more even more American-centered lens and a black and sort of queer lens as well. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you for taking the time.
Sure.
I enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say to the audience? Also, where can everyone find you if they want to follow you and follow your work?
I'm on Instagram at Ray the Destroyer. My website is creator-destroyer.com. I'm not on TikTok because I need to accomplish things in my life.
Yes.
And same, that's why I'm not on Twitter. So
yeah.
Instagram.
Are you on Threads?
No, I don't need to talk to y'all that much. Like honestly, like I'm good.
I was on it for like a week and then it's died down for me as well. Like I actually have shit to do.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Well, this was awesome. Thank you again. Thank you for joining us for another episode of OK Copy Podcast, and we'll see you soon.